हाँ, thank you माताजी. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. नमां विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने. नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादि पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद. हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयति गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्री चैतन्येश्वरम्. Thank you so much everyone for joining the Gita Sadhaka weekend class on Sunday. So it is now 8:40. So I am planning to take 20-25 minutes, but you know how my plans works. So what do you want me to do? Shall I continue the text 7 of Kevalashtakam?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes,
We are
Prabhuji.
waiting for that. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhuji.
And our
Okay, fine. So if you are ready, so if it goes little over time, I hope you will be comfortable. Is there any disturbance from my end? Because it is little raining over here.
No,
Is my voice
Prabhuji,
clear?
it's good, Prabhuji. Hare
It
Krishna.
is clear, Prabhuji.
Great. Okay. Fine. So we will sing the Kevalashtakam first, and then we'll get into the explanation. Madhuram madhurebhyopi mangalebhyopi mangalam pavanam pavanebhyopi hare nameva kevalam. Hare nameva kevalam Brahma stambha paryantam sarvamayam jagata satyam satyam punah satyam Hare nameva kevalam Hare nameva kevalam Saguru sapita chapi samata bandhavopi saha shikshaye chet sada smartum Hare nameva kevalam Hare nameva kevalam Nishvase nahi vishvasaha kada rudho bhavishyati kirtaniyamato balyat Hare nameva kevalam Hare nameva kevalam Hare sadavase tatra yatra bhagavata janaha gayanti bhakti bhavena Hare nameva kevalam Hare nameva kevalam Aho dukham mahadukham Dukha dukhataram yataha Kachartham vismritam ratna Hare nameva kevalam Hare nameva kevalam Diyatam diyatam karno Niyatam niyatam vachaha Giyatam giyatam nityam Hare nameva kevalam Hare nameva kevalam Trini kritya jagat sarvam Rajate sakalopare Chidanandamayam Shuddham Hare Nameva Kevalam Hare Nameva Kevalam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Kevalashtakam ki jai. So today we will see the 7th verse, which says that Diyatam Diyatam Karno Niyatam Niyatam Vachaha Giyatam Giyatam Nityam Harer Nameva Kevalam. So the translation says, it should be heard again and again with one's ears. It should be uttered over and over with one's voice. It should be perpetually sung and sung anew. The holy name of Sri Hari alone is everything. Now this verse actually talks about engaging our senses into Krishna's service. So when we talk about bhakti, bhakti is a path of sensory spirituality. Normally when we talk about senses, we lot of times we hear that, engaging our senses into this material world is the cause of entanglement. So most of the times we say, like, you have to restrain your senses. Senses are very bad. If you get entangled over here, then you keep on doing the same work again and again, and you'll just caught in this material world. But actually, when we talk about the Vedic perspective, there are three broader lines or broader paths which we talk about. One is karma, jnana, and bhakti. So what karma talks about? Now, karma tells that, you can make some adjustment into this world, and then you can enjoy this world. So you can perform some little austerities, you can do some little adjustment, and this place will become the place for enjoyment. So what the karma kanda or the karmis will try to do, they want to create happiness over here only. So their idea is that, let us do something so that we can enjoy our sense gratification here itself. So we'll try to avoid our suffering, and we'll make some adjustment, we'll enjoy here only. And what jnana talks about, now when we talk, before we talk about jnana, actually what scientist does or what the modern science talks about is also a part of karma. Lot of complex knowledge is involved in actually, scientific inventions and all, but actually that same thing again falls under the category of karma only. Why? Because even with our inventions, our idea is like how we can make our life better here only. It doesn't talk about going beyond this world. It always talks about, okay, let us make some technological adjustment, let us bend the nature, material nature, and let us increase our sense gratification. So all the technology, most of the things, if we see, they are actually trying to satisfy our senses only, right? They are trying to satisfy all our desires. So like that, science, the modern science also comes under karma only. So what generally the karmis or the karma kanda people will do, they want to follow the scriptures and they want to perform some yajnas so that they can go, enjoy in this world, in this earthly planets. And after the death, they want to go to the Swargaloka and all and have more luxurious sense gratification. And what modern science talks about, let us bend the material nature, let us understand the science and make things which can increase our pleasure. So both are actually talking about sense gratification only. So this comes under karma. And what talks about, what jnana talks about, so jnana mostly is related to vairagya. So whenever we talk about jnanis, they always talk about how we have to restrict our senses or we have to withdraw our senses from this world, because all of these things which are in this material world, whichever promises that, I will give you pleasure, I will give you pleasure, those are actually not giving us the pleasure. Those are the false promises. Just like a fish, when it gets attracted to the bait, what will happen? It not only get into trouble, but actually it loses its life. A rat, when it sees the cheese in a trap, on a mouse trap, what happens? It get attracted to the food, but because of that, it loses the life. So this whole material world is like that only. Things will come in front of us, they promise that, there will be pleasure, but these are all the false promises. So the Gyanis talk about just reject this world. Do not engage your senses into this world. Now, bhakti is not like jnana, it is different. So, bhakti talks about neither rejecting nor accepting the senses for the self. So, when we talk about karma or jnana, they both talk about either going towards the world, looking at the world, or looking away from the world. What bhakti tells about? It says, do not look towards sense gratification, neither look towards withdrawing all your senses. What do you have to do? You have to look beyond the senses and you have to look towards the Supreme Lord. So if I tell you about the three J's, Jiva, Jagat, and Jagadish. So Jiva means the soul, Jagat means the material nature or this material world, and Jagadish means the Supreme Lord. So when we talk about karma, the Jiva is only thinking about how I can enjoy the Jagat, the material world. And when we talk about the Jnanis, what they are telling, how we can reject this world. But this both karma and jnana are not focusing on the Jagadish, Supreme Lord. So what Bhakti tells us, Bhakti says that you need not reject the senses, you need not accept the senses for self. But what you have to do, you have to engage your senses in serving the Lord of the senses, that is Rishikesha. So one of the names of the Supreme Lord Krishna is Rishikesha. Rishik means senses and Isha means the Lord of the senses. So Rishikesha, we have to serve. So here we are not talking about aversion from the senses. We are not talking about enjoying them. We are talking about how we have to engage in the Lord's service. So in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we see there is a verse which says, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatarham Upayunjataha Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchate. So Bhakti also talks about Vairagyam. But what it says, when one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. So this is being talked into Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So we are utilizing this world to serve the Lord. And one of the items in this material world is our own senses also. So it is not that we are rejecting senses. We are not rejecting the material things, but the idea of enjoying these things for self is what we are rejecting. So there is a difference between the Gyanis and Bhaktas. So what is the difference? The Gyanis will reject everything. They will say everything is Maya. Often we hear one of the aphorism which says that, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. So only that supreme Brahman light, that is the only truth. Everything else is Maya. So let us not get engaged into that. But Bhakti gives a broader perspective. It says, yes, what is Maya? This material world is not Maya. But we are thinking that let me enjoy this world. Let me squeeze pleasure and happiness from this material things. That is actually Maya. Otherwise, the same material things can be used in the service of the Lord and we can actually get purified. So one of the main obstacle which Srila Rupa Goswami talks about as an obstacle in the path of bhakti is called as prajalpa. So prajalpa means that mundane talk. Mundane talk means talk which is not related to Krishna. Okay. Talk can be politics, talk can be sports, talk can be movies, whatever it can be. If it is not in relation with Krishna, then it is called as prajalpa, right? Most often our gossips, our criticism, and our unnecessary talks that we have are called as prajalpa. So when you engage in prajalpa, what will happen? Initially, they'll give us some pleasure for our ego, our false ego. And later we will form some conceptions. And based on that conceptions, our beliefs will form. And based on that, we will start living with them. So that is why it is a very big obstacle. It may start little, but it has a very great impact on us. So that is why Srila Rupa Goswami says we should avoid prajalpa. Now, how we can do prajalpa? With our tongue. So if we do prajalpa, then we get entangled in this world. But with this same tongue, what we can do? We can chant Hare Krishna, we can eat prasadam, we can do Krishna Katha. So that same tongue, which is used for mundane talks, will go for entanglement. And that same tongue, which actually used for Krishna Katha, can actually disentangle us. So it will actually become the reason for our liberation. So it is not that we are rejecting what we have, but we are rejecting the idea that using everything that we have for our own sense gratification. What is the idea? The idea of the bhakti is that let us use everything in the service of Krishna. So even in the Chaitanya Charitamrit, it is said that Sarvopadi Vinirmuktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktir Uchate. So what is the best form of service? Is like using your senses in the service of Lord Rishikesha. Right? So text 7, when we talk about it, so all our senses have some purpose. Okay, they have some craving. But what we gonna do? We're going to engage them into the higher taste. So rather than going for the sense perception or getting absorbed in the material things, what we are doing, we are trying to utilize these senses so that we can have absorption in Krishna. Now, why it is important that we should not reject our senses? Because we are in a material body and we cannot experience the Satchidananda Vigraha directly, right? So we have to go through with our senses. So before we actually understand, experience, and realize Krishna, we have to start seeing everything in relation with Krishna. And we have to start creating some kind of stimulus which can actually give us a trigger or give us a glimpse of Krishna's experience. So there is a concept called as Uddipan in the our scriptures. Uddipan means spiritual stimuli. Okay, so we all of us have some kind of stimulus, right? Now we all have different kinds of temptations, right? So similarly, we all have different kinds of stimulus which actually awakens our Krishna consciousness. For some people, kirtans are very attractive. For some people, prasadam is very attractive. For some people, deities darshan is very attractive. For some people, the philosophical study and all, that is very attractive. For some people, the pastimes of Krishna are very attractive. So what is this? We are having our own spiritual stimulus. Now, Uddipan means having a spiritual stimuli that can awaken our Krishna consciousness. So what we have to do? We have to identify what is our Uddipan. And based on that Uddipan, we have to create our environment in such a way that can remind us about Krishna, that can remind us that, okay, I'm not from this world and I have to get attached to Krishna, not to this world. So all those stimulus we have to create. So generally when we go to the temple, naturally we'll start feeling nice, right? Naturally we'll start feeling peaceful. We might come up with so many thoughts, but the moment we enter into the temple, by seeing the deities, by seeing the devotees, by seeing that environment, we actually get pacified. So many of our thoughts and agitations will actually get pacified. Now why this is happening? Because we experience through our senses. So we are seeing the Lord's deities with our eyes, we are trying to eat prasadam with our tongue, we are trying to listen to the kirtan with our ears. So what is happening? Some or other way, some spiritual stimulus is happening in our body. And because of that, what is happening? Rather than we thinking about the material things, we start thinking and feeling and experiencing the spirituality. So what is happening is we are experiencing spirituality through our senses only. So they are like the user interface. So if we reject this user interface, what will happen? We cannot be able to connect to Krishna, right? So these senses are given to us so that we can utilize them in the service of Krishna. Then only gradually the purification will happen. And over a period of time, even without any spiritual stimulus, okay, around nowadays, we need some kind of spiritual stimulus around us, right? You can simply observe when you are in the association of devotees, what kind of thoughts will be there. Let us say this is our association, our class, what kind of thoughts are going on now. And once the class is over, after an hour or two, just think what kind of thoughts are going on. So what is happening? Once we create a spiritual environment over here, our thoughts are changing and they are directing us towards Krishna. So when we are in the devotees association, they're directing our thoughts towards Krishna. When we are not, they're directing us towards some material desire and all. So what is happening? The environment outside is actually affecting our consciousness. And how this transmission of experience is happening? Through our senses only. So that is the reason we have to do something that can make us, feel more about Krishna, think more about Krishna. And for all of us, it cannot be the same thing. For an example, Chaitanya Charandas Prabhu, when he actually comes in front of the deities, he chants some verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, which actually glorifies the Supreme Lord. And unless he actually recites those verses, He will not feel like, he had the darshan. Okay, so that is his spiritual stimuli to have the experience of Krishna. Now he has shared this thing in one of his classes. And then another devotee who was listening to the class, he thought like, let me try. And he started doing that. And what happened is, after a few days, he met Chaitanya Charan Prabhu and he told, actually, Prabhu, you have given one idea of spiritual stimulus, and I tried that. But actually, when I'm coming in front of the deities, I'm trying to recollect those verses which I wanted to recite in front of the deities. But the tension and anxiety to remember those verses is so much that whatever bhakti I have, that is also going away. So what is happening? What is the spiritual stimuli for Chaitanya Charan Prabhu cannot be the same for the other devotee. The shoe which fits in one leg actually bites the another leg. So we all have different size of the shoe, isn't it? So similarly, our stimulus can be different. The standard is that we have to remember Krishna. We should never forget Krishna. But how we gonna remember Krishna? How we gonna become more and more Krishna conscious? There is a huge room for all of us so that we can have our individual thoughts. So it's like the mountain is there and we have to climb the mountain. But from which direction we are climbing, that is individual decision. But what is the standard? That we have to climb sincerely that mountain. So similarly, we have to remember Krishna. But what kind of spiritual stimulus will be useful for me may not be for you. As like some people may be very much interested in Kirtan, and for them, Kirtan is like the absorption for them. So their spiritual stimulus happens through ears, right? And for some people, when they see the deities, decoration and alankar and all, they actually forget the whole beauty of the world. And they will feel like the only beautiful thing is these deities. Nothing else is beautiful. So whenever they see the deities, their Krishna consciousness get awakened so much that they feel like anything that can attract him or distract him outside the deities is not so worth. So what is happening? We all have our own spiritual stimulus. Now, why this is important? Because this will help us to create a spiritual environment around us. Okay, so some of the devotees, they put on the walls the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and some of the devotees actually put the chanting box on all the throughout the day. Some of the devotees write different verses on the walls, or they might keep some cards, or they might have some kind of photos which can remind Krishna. So all of them do some or other way, so that because in this material world there are many things which will actually distract us. Okay, they will always drag us to enjoy the material sense gratification. So we have to create an environment where we can get constant reminders about Krishna. And that's how what will happen? We will be able to remember more and more about Krishna. So this bhakti has the standards, okay? But it also gives us preferences also. So there are principles, there are standards which we have to follow. But in that also, how much we want to follow, in what way we want to follow, we have that independence. Just like for some people, chanting 64 rounds or sometimes 100 plus rounds on Ekadashi makes them feel very much absorbed in Krishna. And for some people, maybe they chant 16 rounds or 25, and they actually spend more time in reading Srimad Bhagavatam or listening to the lectures or do some seva. So like that. So each one of us have different kind of psychophysical nature and different set of senses. We all have the same senses, okay? But the sense perception in what way we want to have it, that may vary. So according to that, what we have to do? We have to engage in the Lord's service. If you feel like your stimulus is like, if I read more Srimad Bhagavatam or books, then it will give me more Krishna consciousness, you can do that, right? If you feel like if I chant more, I can do like that, I can feel more about Krishna consciousness, then you can do that. If you feel like, okay, reading and this chanting, I cannot focus much, but if you give me some seva, some physical seva, then I'll be very much engaged. So what is happening? We are utilizing all our senses in the service of Krishna, and we are trying to create an environment based on our inclinations. So bhakti doesn't say that this is the standard and you have to follow, whether you like it or not. I want you to the follow. Okay, so you have to chant 64 rounds, then only I will say you are a devotee. No, it cannot be. Prabhupada said minimum 16 rounds. If you feel like chanting more, you can chant more. But it doesn't mean that if someone is chanting less than 64, or like if someone is not chanting extra rounds, we cannot say that they are not Krishna conscious, because for them maybe engaging in Krishna service has a different ways, right? So what we are talking all about this, why we have to talk all this, because whenever we come into Krishna consciousness, sometimes the talk about renunciation becomes so much focused. Oh, you have to quit this, you have to restrict this, you have to forget this and all. So no, 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 no. This kind of talk will be very much. So this is actually more jnana path. So in jnana, what will happen? They talk about rejecting the world, reject this, reject this, reject this, and all. But in bhakti, we talk about what to accept. Okay, there are things which we have to reject, but our whole focus should not be on renunciation, right? Let us say sometimes, some people do Nirjala Ekadashi, right? But some people cannot do Nirjala Ekadashi, because if they do Nirjala Ekadashi, then what will happen on the Dwadashi and Trayodashi? It will be very horrible, right? So they cannot, what you say, they cannot bear that kind of fasting. So for them, what they can do, they can just take some fruits, or they can take some Ekadashi prasadam, and they can focus on the Lord. So the point over here, that fasting on Ekadashi is like we are focusing on the Lord, we are serving the Lord, right? But if our renunciation becomes the center of our bhakti, then what will happen? Then we will do Nirjal Ekadashi, and we will comment on others, we'll criticize others by saying that, see, they're not able to do Nirjala Ekadashi. They're always wanted to eat something, sense gratifiers. So what is happening? So we are renunciation focused, but that is actually not elevating us. Rather, we are doing aparad also. So bhakti involves some vairagya, but that vairagya has to be, subordinated with the principle that why I'm having this vairagya, because I want to serve the Lord, right? We restrain from the normal food on Ekadashi so that we can focus more on Krishna, right? Not that we can do a show of like how great I am, right? See how can I do and all. No, that is not the point. That whatever is helping you to serve the Lord more and more, you should do it. So bhakti always talks about standards, and it also gives us the choice, because individuality cannot be killed. So we cannot restrain our senses completely. We cannot follow a particular standard in a standard, one standard way only, right? So we all have room for our own preferences, and we all have to think and engage our senses in Krishna service. How you will engage it, you have to find out your own stimulus, and based on that, what will happen? If you like to do something and you do it for Krishna, then Krishna will be pleased, you will also be pleased. Like I always share this example. Once Ishan Prabhu, was asking for some service to Srila Prabhupada, because everyone was coming and telling that, Prabhupada, you has given me this service. So this is done, this much is done and all. Everyone was reporting. But Ishan Prabhu could not have any service. So he went to Srila Prabhupada and he asked, like, Prabhupada, please give me some service. And Prabhupada said, what do you want to do? So then he said, he was thinking, and if I say that I want to do this, I want to do that, then it might be sense gratification. So what I'll do, I will tell Prabhupada that, give me any service. So he replied the same. Prabhupada, I can do anything. You give me any service. So then Prabhupada asked again, but tell me what you want to do. So then again he replied the same. Anything, Prabhupada, you can tell me anything. So then Prabhupada became very grave and he said, understand our philosophy. Identify what you can do and do that for Krishna. So what Prabhupada wanted to here emphasize that you can choose what you want to do for Krishna. And in that, you will have more and more inspiration, and you'll never feel like it is a work. You will rejoice, and in your rejoice, Krishna will also be pleased. So there are two circles, one which we like to do, and there is a circle of bhakti, that what all things has to be done. Now where these two circles will intersect, that will become our area of the service. So we have to reject some of the things which we like, but it doesn't mean that we reject everything that we like, but we start doing those things for the Krishna. So we reject the idea that I am doing everything what I like to satisfy myself. So the idea of bhakti is like, do what you like, but do it for Krishna. If you like singing, you sing for Krishna. If you like cooking, cook for Krishna. If you like painting, paint the Krishnas, all the designs and all. And if you like doing some seva, like physical seva and all, help in the building construction. If you like, you have money, you want to do more charity, donate for the temples. If you like, you can speak nicely, go on preaching. If you can read books nicely, design some programs and design some PowerPoint presentations and all. So what we are doing, we are not rejecting anything. We are actually finding out everything that can be used in the service of Krishna. So the karma path says that utilize everything that you have in your own enjoyment. Jnana says you cannot enjoy anything. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that this material world is a treacherous soil. So what does it mean? Treacherous means it is like very kind of a false impression giving soil. That means if you going on a road and if you see that the soil is very slippery and all, what you will do, you'll be careful in walking. But if you see that the soil is very normal and all, then what you will do, you'll just go normally. But imagine if the soil looks normal but it is slippery, then what will happen? We think that it is normal and we walk and we slip down. So this is the same thing happened to Duryodhana, that he was in the Maya Sabha, he thought there is a land, but there was water and he fell down. So similar in this material world, there are so many false promises that actually material things gives us. But that doesn't mean that everything has to be rejected. Now we have to be careful and we have to try utilizing everything of this world in the service of Krishna. And in that all the things, our senses will also come. So what these senses has to remind us, it has to remind us that these are given by the Lord. So whatever is given by the Lord has to be utilized in the service of the Lord. So we are neither rejecting everything nor accepting anything for the service of our own self. What we are doing, we are accepting everything and we are actually utilizing that in the service of Krishna. And how we are utilizing it? By identifying our inclinations, by identifying our spiritual stimuli, our uddipan, and based on that, we are creating different environment for ourselves. And based on that, we are trying to engage more and more in the service of Krishna. So, what this verse says, I'll just recite again, and you can meditate on what we have discussed so far. Diyatam diyatam karno नियतां नियतां वचः गीयतां गीयतां नित्यं हरे नामेव केवलम् हरे नामेव केवलम्. It should be heard again and again with one's ears. It should be uttered over and over with one's voice. It should be perpetually sung anew. What we have to sing, what we have to hear, what we have to loudly utter, that Harer Nameva Kevalam. The holy name is everything. Shri Shri Kevalashtakam ki Jai.
जय हरि बोल प्रभु जी हरि
हरि बोल प्रभु जी
हरि
हरि
बोल
बोल
प्रभु
हरि
जी
बोल
हरि
प्रभु
बोल
जी
हरि
हरि
बोल
बोल हरे कृष्णा.